Okay, good morning, everybody. It's Monday, April 28th. Welcome to my live. My name is Mike Patel. If you haven't been here, the name of the channel is Home Savvy Central. And we have a really, what I call off the wall topic today, which I'm really excited to talk about. And I have a guest with me, so I'm going to introduce my guest shortly. Let me just brief you on what the topic is. As you can see, the title is The End of Real Estate Agents, The Fallout Begins. Does that mean that I'm not going to be here in 2025 or 2026? I'll be around. I'm going to be around, and a lot of agents will be around. But what's happening is because of the drastic changing in real estate market, especially with the new 6% commission change, which I'm sure you know about it and we'll talk about it, the way the Zillow is advertising, the way the buyers are working, the way the realtors have to work. Our industry is changing drastically and very fast, and a lot of agents are leaving the business. So we have a lot to talk about. And most importantly, if you are a seller, which I'm assuming you're a homeowner, you're thinking about selling, so you are a seller, but you will also be a buyer. So how is all this going to affect you in the next 2 months or in the next 2 years? So let's talk about this. And with me today, I have a special guest who's an expert in real estate. He knows the policies. He's been around since 2008 or 9, I believe. Very experienced Terrence Richardson from Atlanta. Terrence, just tell us about yourself so that we know who you are, and then we'll jump right into our topics.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for having me on the live today. Appreciate it. So as you mentioned, I'm an agent here in Atlanta, Georgia. Been selling real estate and helping families since 2009. I've had the pleasure of helping hundreds of clients, and we've seen every spectrum of the market. I got in when the market was the worst one since the Great Recession, the Great Housing Depression of the 30s. And we've seen the other extreme with one of the most competitive seller markets in history. So we've seen a lot, and looking forward to the topics that we're going to talk about today.
Great. So let me ask you and put you right on the spot, but you're an expert. So what do you see the major changes, what you did business? And when I say you, a typical realtor did business in 2008 after the recession. And what are you seeing now? Because right now, recession was here and we're here. So what are you saying the difference as far as the realtor's point of view,
Yeah.
when a buyer or sellers are thinking about realtors? What's a major shift that you've seen?
Yeah. So I think as we move forward with technology makes everything easier. Getting access to information is a lot easier today than it was back in 2008 and 9. And so I think consumers are a lot more educated about the process and just houses in general. Information's at your fingertips with websites like Zillow and Realtor.com, Redfin, et cetera. And I think our role in a real estate transaction is shifting a little bit, but it's always been about bringing the most value with helping your client's best interest. So with buyers, for example, getting the best deal, and with sellers, it's helping them maximize the return on investment when they go to sell a house. And with all of the changes happening in the industry now, there's never been a more important time to work with somebody that knows exactly how to help you maximize that, from getting your house ready for market and working on areas of opportunity to getting you the best possible price and helping you preserve that and getting to the closing table successfully.
Right, correct. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that opinion. Yeah, I think there's a big market shift, and I think you hit it right on the head. What I'm sure that's the right quote, but technology is changing a lot, and now AI is going to change it a lot. I use AI every day, and we won't go there today. That's not the topic, but it's amazing how I use AI in everything. In fact, to prepare for this topic, which I prefer, guess where I go? I go to AI and type in things, gives me everything, gives me the resources. So not only has technology changes so far, but now we're going to see more changes with this AI technology. So if you're a buyer and seller, and I'm sure you're using technology, and just because you go on a website doesn't mean you're using technology. I think the true technology now is the way the AI is behaving and changing our behavior. And when I say our, I don't mean realtors. I mean everybody, consumers. The way you go to restaurants, the way you do anything, it's going to be AI. You're going to ask AI, it's going to spit out. Am I saying the right thing, Terrence?
I mean, I think so. I think those who won't use technology, it's the same thing when the internet came out. A lot of people didn't want to get on board. And then as that technology developed and a lot of new possibilities opened up, the world got better, more efficient. AI is doing the same thing. So if you're not going to use AI to your advantage, you're going to be left behind. But it can enhance what you do in every day. Absolutely.
Right, right. And on that note, just to let you know, an average realtor today is over 55 years old. Most of them are females, which means a lot of them are 65, 70, like I'm over 65. So we're elderly. And in other words, we are not as tech savvy as maybe Terrence, who looks much younger than me. And there are other kids coming into the industry, 30 or 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 35-year-olds, and all they do is go on TikTok and Instagram and they do business. I don't do a lot of business from TikTok and Instagram. I do business, but not as much as these young kids do, right? So technology is evolving. So if you're not on there, it does thing. But let's talk about why I brought this topic up. First of all, in the last 5 years, well, let's talk about in the last 6 months, there has been one change in real estate that is going to make a huge impact in the next 5 years. But let's go back 2020 when COVID hit. COVID changed the way we did business. In fact, for the first time in 25 years, I sold a house during COVID, not even going in the house or not even showing the house. That had never happened. And now it's happening more. I just sold another house, closed escrow in Fontana, brand new house. Never saw the house. The guy was from Canada and he bought it. So COVID changed the way we do business. And when I say we, the buyers and sellers do business as well as the realtors. But let's jump into what we really want to talk about is what is the impact or what's going to happen with the realtors in the long term. Let's go back 15 years when the travel industry changed, when it went to the internet, right? It wiped out all the travel agents. Unless you're a specialist in cruise or a specialist in guided tours going to Africa and safaris, you are okay. But if you were just selling airline tickets, you are out of the business. And I think we're coming to that stage. So let's talk about, Terrence, what happened in August 2024, where me personally, I'm really mad at realtor.com, which I belong to and been a member for 25 years. They didn't do justice. They didn't do their homework. They sold out. Is when that 6% commission law came in. How did that impact us? And how is it changing? Let's briefly talk about that before we go on to the next points.
Sure. So I'm in the state of Georgia, and with real estate, every single state is different. And in Georgia, it hasn't really honestly affected us a whole lot because the way that we've been structured here for the last 25, 30 years, we've had buyer broker agency for a very long time. And I have to give credit to the people that run the Georgia Association of Realtors credit because they had the foresight of thinking that, hey, one day this could potentially be an issue. But in a lot of other states, it was sub-agency to the seller. Everybody represented the seller in the deal. And that's part of what brought on the commission lawsuits that started in Missouri. But in Georgia, it's just business as usual. 6% has always been a negotiable item. You tend to see it a lot. But, we were getting 5, 6, 7% before, and we're still getting 5, 6, or 7% now in Georgia, depending on the value that you're bringing to the table. What I think this is doing is, especially in the short run, it's going to put a bigger divide on good agents who are strong negotiators that are representing their best clients' interests and those who don't really have any business being in the space. Because if you can't negotiate and communicate the value that you bring to the table, then what are you? A glorified door opener. And that the market's not going to pay a lot for that.
No. Yeah. I mean, those days are gone where you pick 5 homes, show it to them, take them in your car, open the door and say, oh, this is the kitchen. They don't know this is a kitchen. I don't know why realtor says it. Oh, here's the bathroom. Well, I'm not stupid. I can see it's a bathroom, right? I mean, stupid agents do that. Good agents just open the door and let them see it, right? And answer their questions. I mean, I don't have to tell them this is a living room. And a lot of agents do that. Oh, welcome to this living room. That just throws me off, so because when I go to open houses and things and I look at agents and, but anyway, not criticizing agents, but like you mentioned earlier, the cream of the crop is going to survive. And the agents who just do their things, not knowing what they do, don't know what the trends are, not knowing what the updates are, they're going to be gone. So that's what it is. But so I'm glad to hear that you already have that in California. All states had that policy. But the difference now is I'm sure you had the buyer broker commitment that you did. I never did that, but I started doing that now, which is now it's required to do that. How did you handle the commission when you said to the buyer, hey, buyer, Mr. Mrs. Buyer, if you buy this house, quote, you owe me 2%, 3%, whatever. How did you handle that? And when I say you, Georgia realtors handle it.
Great question. So I think it comes down again to how every individual agent does business. For the last 10, 15 years, I would sit down with a buyer to do a consultation, and we would talk about how I would be compensated. And because it was kind of the way that it worked, right? A listing agent would negotiate a fee with the seller, 5, 6, or 7%, and by default, they were generally sharing half of that. So my buyer clients were aware that most likely my fee would be compensated by the seller, shared half with the listing broker. But in the event that they didn't, they would be responsible for covering the difference. So that conversation is still the same conversation that I'm having with them today. I think there's some really good strategies for sellers out there to use the new tactics that you have. And I think there's a short window before things like the market has to get used to a new way of doing things. And a lot of agents right now, I think, at least in my market, they're trying to understand how to do business with the way that the Department of Justice and the way that this lawsuit basically mandates. And I think a lot of agents, for better or worse, expected the listing agent to negotiate their fee for them. And now part of what I was saying earlier about you're going to see who the good negotiators are, that's going to come to light because you're not having your fee pre-negotiated anymore. Is it in a seller's best interest to offer compensation to make sure that you have the most amount of showings possible? I think there's a time and place for that. You know, if you look at the different parts of the US, or some parts of the US that are on fire right now, very low inventory, something goes in the market, it's gone within hours. In our market, it's starting to stabilize a little bit more. So we're seeing 40, 50, 60 days on market. Not to say that there aren't parts of Atlanta where stuff's gone within hours of listing in the hottest parts, but you always want to be mindful of what's going to bring the most traffic through the door, because the more showings you get, the more traffic, the more offers, and the more offers, the more leverage you have as a seller to turn that into potentially a higher net price. So would you potentially be willing to offer a little bit more compensation to make sure that every agent in the market is showing the property? In a market where things aren't moving very quickly, that makes a lot of sense. You'd be shooting yourself in the foot if you said, hey, you know what? Buyers can pay that compensation. They can pay their down payment. They can pay their closing costs, but I'm not paying any of an agent's compensation. If I'm working with a buyer, and let's say it's a first-time home buyer and they've saved enough for their down payments, in our market, it's normal at this point. It's very common, at least, for a buyer to pay their own closing costs. That's a lot of money between down payments and closing costs to also have to pay their fee. What's going to happen is, even though that buyer may like your listing, they're going to go look at other houses where sellers are willing to pay that fee.
Absolutely. Especially the first time home buyers, where you know, and I know that, you know, almost 30-35% of all the home sales are first time buyers. And a lot of those first time buyers are FHA buyers or VA buyers, where the government helps them with the closing cost or better interest rate or better DTI ratios or better, you know, easier qualification. So if I have a first time buyer barely coming up with 3.5% down payment, let's say on a $400,000 house, that's $12,000. And now you tell him, oh, you got to pay me 3%. That's another $12,000. He's not going to buy from you because he doesn't have the $12,000. Not that he doesn't want to pay you or she doesn't want to pay you. They're barely scraping $12,000. Then they have to pay closing cost, insurance deposits, property tax deposits. They're probably going to move, so they have to rent a truck or hire a company, buy some appliances. And now you tell them, oh, you got to pay me $12,000, 3%, you know, they may not use you, you know, so it's a big issue.
Find a house that is offering that compensation, right? Because they're looking at
exactly
a way that they can afford it. And you're going to have savvy home sellers that are going to offer the compensation because they know they're going to get more showings, more offers, and a better price by doing that.
Right. Especially in markets where, like you said, some markets like Texas and Florida, there are markets where they're 60, 90 days on the market. And some markets like Orange County, they're selling in 30 days. If it's priced right, marketed right. In my area, they're selling in 30 days. And there's multiple offers. The last 2 homes that I sold, one is closing today, they had multiple offers on it. So market's strong here, but in Florida, there's some areas in Florida, they got hit with the hurricanes and the insurance and the property tax. It's taking them 3-4 months to sell. So they have to offer that. So let's go back to the dilemma that we were talking about. One is in the NAR lawsuit changed the way we do business forever, right? Now that this buyer has to sign a buyer broker agreement if you want to show them, and then they have to agree on a commission whether they're going to pay you or you're going to get it from the seller. So that was the thing. There's a new lawsuit out there, and I'm not going to get into details because they're still out there. It has to do with clear cooperation and how much time do you need on the market. So let's talk about that briefly. But let me just kind of read what a clear corporation is before we get into that. So let me share a screen here quickly and talk about what a clear corporation is so that the viewers can know. So what is clear corporation policy? This is from the California Regional MLS, which I belong to, the CRMLS. So it's, it's a legit source. It says here that the clear corporation policy is a NAR mandated policy. NAR is the National Association of Realtors policy that governs the public marketing of exclusive listings and their entry into the multiple listing service. Within one business day of marketing a property to the public that is subject to an exclusive listing agreement, the listing broker must submit listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Of course, this is California based. I don't know, Terrence, if you have that, but this implies to California, and a lot of states has that.
Yeah, we do. So we have in Metro Atlanta 2 major MLSs. There's First MLS, which is broker owned. It's not a part of NAR. And then you have Georgia MLS, which is a part of NAR. And so the rules are within 24 hours of signing a listing agreement, it's got to be entered into the MLS.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what's the new lawsuit going on or chatter going on with Zillow saying that they will not list any properties that's not in the multiple listing service? We know that what happened with a lot of agents not being able to sell so many properties, and if it does not sell, what they're doing is instead of putting in the multiple listing service, they're trying to put it on private websites, company websites, or even Zillow without it being in the multiple listing service. And Zillow is saying, no, that's not going to happen. So let me show you another policy on that. Let me change this screen here. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Present, share screen. Okay, let's talk about that. So can you see the screen? It talks about Zillow Group.
Yeah,
private listing networks are damaging the housing market, harming buyers, sellers, and agents. And I'll just kind of read through a little bit. And this is from Zillow. Zillow Group is part of Zillow. Transparency and equitable access to real estate listings are at risk, threatening to push the industry backwards and harm buyers, sellers, and their agents. Most homes for sale are listed on the multiple listing service, a database shared by real estate industry so all agents can see each other's listings and best serve their clients. That's the key word, best serve their clients. The MLS database is also what efficiently feeds listing to consumer platforms, allowing you to see for sale homes on places like Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, and many other sites. However, there is a concerning push by some within the real estate industry to hide homes for sale on private networks through what's known as pocket listings or private listing network, which are accessible only with and through exclusive groups of agents. And that's, I believe, that's what Zillow and other websites, they are private websites, nothing to do with Realtor.com or nothing to do with Realtor, private website, are trying to avoid. So why are they trying to avoid this, and what's the reasoning behind that, Terrence? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think it all started with giving sellers choice, and I think the brokers. I think we're okay to talk about it. It's all public information. But Compass as a brokerage, ever since they've come on the scene, they've tried to find an angle to be a disruptor in the space. They're great with technology. They do a lot of really great things. They're a great brokerage. Part of what they believe is that when a listing goes to market, the days on market and the price reductions ultimately hurt the seller. So their perspective is, if we keep a listing private, we'll expose it to the clients that we have in-house, and that's not going to start days on market. You're not going to be able to see any price reductions or anything like that. It's just going to be private information. And then if you choose to go to market afterwards, then you're starting from zero, and you haven't already accrued both of those items, both days on market and price reductions. So I think their system allows for third-party agents to post their listings and so forth, but they're trying to create their own version of the MLS. The challenge with that is that it's the same thing when you have a house that, let's say, needs a little bit of work, and you call like one of the We Buy Houses people. Very different models. Compass is a little bit more, or a lot more luxury, but the point is going to illustrate well, I think. So if only one person knows that your house is for sale, do they have any incentive to give you the best possible price for that house? How do you know that that's the best price that you're going to get? You take that same fixer upper and you put it on the market, and all of the investors and people can bid on it. You typically get a better price. So it's the same thing whether you're at the mid-market, upper market, luxury. If only a select few people know that your house is for sale, how are you going to get the best possible price? So I think from Zillow and Redfin's perspective, and my brokerage, I'm with eXp Realty, we've sided with more exposure is always better. So the more exposure you get, the better. The more people will know that a house is for sale, and the better price you're ultimately going to get. I think where I can understand both sides of the coin a little bit is if you're a celebrity or a person of a certain authority, and you need to have, or you don't want everybody knowing that your house is for sale, then being able to have the choice of selling it privately makes a lot of sense. I think sellers should have choice, but I think the industry as a whole should educate them on what the statistics look like. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I was listening to a podcast last week where they were talking about data that Bright MLS has. Bright MLS is one of the biggest MLSs in the entire country, and they were able to compile data that shows that private listings versus on-market listings, the private listings historically will sell for less money. So sometimes a seller wants to get sold and they don't care about how long it's going to take. They just want the privacy, and they're willing to exchange a little bit of money and sell at a discount in order to make that happen. But if you're like most sellers and you want to use that money to go and put it down on the next house, and you need to get every dollar that you can out of your house, selling it privately is going to hurt you. It's not going to help you. So I think as an industry, we got to make sure that sellers understand that more exposure is generally better.
Right. Absolutely. And you're talking about Compass, but let me talk about my Compass. I'm with First Team Real Estate in Southern California. We have like over 2,000 agents. And you know how it is. If you take a listing today, Terrence, let's say you're in California, once you take a listing, you have a certain time, right? Either you register it, or you put it as a coming soon, or you put it as an active listing. And usually it's within 1 day. You have to put it in MLS saying it's a registered listing. Then you can say, okay, it's coming soon on the market, because, the sellers may need 10 days to clean it up, clean the carpet, declutter, or get ready, or they're going on a vacation, come back. So they need time. So you can say coming soon in 5 days, 10 days, whatever. But here's the advantage with my company. Let's say you're also in First Team, right, Terrence? And we're in First Team, part of the 2,000 agents. And I take a listing, but legally, I can tell you, hey, Terrence, I just took a listing. It's $1 million. It's in Anaheim Hills, got a nice view. And I can tell you about it. And you can bring a buyer and we can sell it. But I cannot put that in MLS. I can even tell you if it's a coming soon, or, hey, it's not going to be ready for 10 days because they're cleaning it, or the dishwasher was not working, so they're fixing it. But, hey, if you want to show it, you could show it. So that's unfair to other companies where they may just have 10 agents. So I can put out an email and say, hey, anybody got a house in Anaheim Hills? I have a buyer that's looking for 4 bedrooms, 2 bath. They can go up to 1.2, blah, blah, blah. And one of the agents can call me and say, hey, Mike, I have one coming up, and I can show that and sell it. So even though it's not in MLS, I can sell it if it's within the brokerage. So there's a lot of gray areas everywhere going on. And of course, I'm just giving you an example. I may not be as accurate. So just a disclosure, I'm giving you an example of what happens, not necessarily in First Team, but a lot of other companies out there, they can do that legally because it's one brokerage. They have different offices. One is in Long Beach and one is in Riverside, but there's still one brokerage under one umbrella. So we can intermarket those without putting it in a multiple listing service as a general. So what's happening is, if, Terrence, you are with a mom and pop realty where it's just a single broker versus I'm with a big company like Compass, you mentioned, we have this brokerage that we can share. Is that a disadvantage to the single brokers or part-time brokers, or, where do you see that going, or what's the plus and minus on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if every brokerage creates their own private networks, it's a step backwards, right? If you go back before the internet 20, 30 years ago, every brokerage had a book of listings. And if you wanted to know what was for sale, you had to go to each real estate company's office, open up the book and flip through the pages to see what was on the market. And so, and that's why a buyer agency wasn't very big back then, because every brokerage held the listings, and you, as a buyer, would walk into those brokerages to see what they offered. So if everybody has a private network and those aren't being propagated and syndicated to the MLS and to these portals like this, then a buyer would have to go to compass.com to see what Compass has. They'd have to go to remax.com to see what Remax has. Keller
Right.
Williams, EXP, First Team. The list goes on and on and on. That's not efficient. And for a less educated buyer, or for someone who doesn't have all the time in the world to go to how many different brokerages are there in America? I think it's over 3,000, right? When you factor in the mom and pop places, it would be a huge step backwards to go from a multiple listing service model to a private model. And I think that's part of what made our system in the US the envy of the world, because when you go to Europe, you go to England, for example, or Australia, they don't have syndication all to one place. You have to go to all of these different places, and it's just not very efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's way different in other countries how they do business. In fact, for example, in Italy, they don't even have a multiple listing service. If you're a broker, you can list it and these open listings, and if you're a buyer, then you have to pay the commission to the buyers. So there's no multiple listing service. At least there was not one in the last 2 or 3 years, unless that changed. So here we are in the USA, we have an exclusive multiple listing service, which is shared nationwide through NAR, and NAR owns realtor.com. But then out of nowhere came all these monsters, which I think NAR really did disservice to realtors. So I have a personal agenda against them. Quote, they gave access to all the data to Zillow and Redfin and Opendoor. In fact, realtor.com has partnered with Opendoor. And, so when you see a listing on realtor.com, Opendoor can make an offer on your property or whatever. So personally speaking, of course, this is my personal opinion, NAR did injustice to their realtors, to their dedicated realtors, but that's a whole new story. But coming back, let's talk more about how NAR is looking at this clear corporation policy. I'm going to read that thing out again. NAR, and this is, by the way, article is March 2025, so it's very recent. NAR introduces new flexibility for sellers while retaining clear corporation policy. New policy statements gives MLS discretion to set a delay period in which sellers and their agents can keep their properties from being marketed publicly through IDX or syndication. Informed consumers' choice might well be a catchphrase for the National Association of Realtors as it navigates an industry-wide dialogue about options for marketing real estate listings. So there's a big thing going on. So I'm just wondering how this will affect the typical realtor. These policy, which way it goes,
Yeah, I think, I'm a member of the National Association of Realtors, and I think that they dropped the ball on this one because I think they had an opportunity to take a leadership position and lead from the front. Instead, they kind of flip-flopped with it because what they're saying is clear cooperation is important, but at the same time, we want to give you the flexibility to create these private networks if you should so choose. Now, again, it comes down to what the seller wants, and I think that the seller should have power over how to market their own property. And at the same time, as I mentioned, I think it's our responsibility to educate them. But I think when you see what's happened, and like last week or the week before when Zillow came out and said that if your listing goes private and you don't put it into the MLS within 24 hours, and when you choose to put it active later, we're not going to display it for the life of the listing. That is a private company. It's a public company, but it's a private organization that's not a part of our industry as a whole. They're a for-profit company that is taking a leadership position, trying to dictate what's going to happen in the industry. And it's a bad look for NAR. NAR could have taken that position and come down on one side or the other instead of coming right down in the middle.
Right. So here's a comparison, and I'm not pushing Zillow, I'm not pushing Redfin, but here's how powerful their sites are. Most of my buyers that I work with, they don't go to Mike Patel's website and do a search. They don't go to realtor.com. Well,
I do. I'm on your site all the time. It's great.
I know. Oh, thank you. I'm talking in general. Well, you're one of the nice buyer that comes on my site. But a lot of them go on Zillow, and the reason they go on Zillow is because, one, they have the listings from realtor.com, which comes from the MLS. the National Multiple Listing Service, which comes from a local boards. They put it on the MLS, and from there it goes to Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com and Opendoor and all the thousands and thousands of websites. The advantage with Zillow is they show you when it was last sold. They show you what it was sold for. They show you what the house next door sold for, right? They show you the stats, what's happening in your zip code. Are the prices going up in the last 6 months? Are they coming down? They show you the trend. So when a buyer comes in and say, hey, Mike, I want to see this home. And like I said, after COVID, everything changed. In the last 3 or 4 months that I've shown, I send them a listing. Hey, Terrence, here are 7 listings. Which one would you see? And I get a text. Oh, I want to see these 3. They don't want to show the ones I showed because they do more research. They see all the pictures. They see the video. They see the Google Earth picture. They know what they want to see. They tell us what they want. I want a house with a pool. I want a single story. But a lot of times the buyers don't know what they want to see. And then when they see a picture or listing, oh yeah, show me this. I just sold the house. It was a rental property. The one I say I just sold one last month with multiple offers. They told me no pool, and they ended up buying one with a pool. So they love the house. And it's a rental. I said, no, don't buy it. But they wanted to buy it. And I told them not to buy one with a pool because of liability. But they said, no, Mike, we love this house. So all the power to the buyers, that saves me time. But what's happening is the whole reason about where the value of the realtor has been diminishing and the danger of not savvy, not experienced, not highly skilled agents. If you're one of those, you're going to hang in there. But if you're not a savvy, up-to-date, trending, AI using high-tech agent, you're going to be out of business. And this is one of the reasons I'm talking about, because if I'm a buyer, I'm not going to realtor.com, or I'm not going to call you, Terrence, say, find me a house. I may call you, but before I call you, I already done all this research. I know the schools I want. I know the area I want. I know what the homes are selling for. So why do they need me as a buyer's agent? That's the whole question. It's technology again.
Yeah, I think that's always been the question, though. It's like, why, if you're going to buy a house, you can have somebody that will guide you through from A to Z that's very experienced to do it every single day. They know how to guide somebody and keep them safe from pitfalls. I think where the real value of an agent is going to present itself, at least that's what I offer my clients right now, is with negotiating. So finding the properties, sure, you can see them online, but we also have access to off-market properties. Now, your typical agent isn't going to go through the trouble of building an inventory of off-market opportunities. They're going to focus on what's on the MLS. But that's certainly one of the different values that we bring to the table with our team is off-market opportunities and basically knowing about properties before they become available for sale. We use a lot of basically a data-driven approach to identify properties that we think are more likely to sell, and can be proactive with approaching those homeowners when it's the right fit. You know, negotiations, you look at it, a lot of people, unfortunately, are low effort, and it's part of why we have a bad rap in this industry. But there are agents who do a really good job for their clients, and those are the ones that are going to continue to be successful into the future. Right. You know, so I think I think it's needed. It's a weaning out period, a weeding out of the weaker agents. I think is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Yeah. Let me give an example. You just reminded me of a story. It happened to me 15 years ago, but the value of a realtor, here's where it comes. Let's say you don't have a realtor and you bought it for sale by owner or whatever, but here's the value comes in. This happened to me 15 years ago. I had a house listed for sale. We had 3 days to close. They were signing loan docs today. This was 15 years ago. My buyer calls me and my seller calls me up. Hey, Mike, I have a problem. I said, what's the issue? I said, my house is on fire. Yeah, his roofer. But I said, did you call fire truck? He said, no, I haven't. Call 911.
Called your realtor
Called
first.
me first. Luckily, I picked up the phone. I said, no, call 911. The roof got burned. We had 3 days to close escrow. My sellers had already a moving truck coming in. The buyers that came to another buyer's agent, they were staying in an apartment. And you know how it is in apartments. You have to give a notice. And once you sign that notice, you're out. And there was panic. We had 3 days. So what happened was I go there. Of course, I go there. I calm the seller down. He's a single guy, medical issues, big medical issues. That's why there was a fire. But let's not get into that. He was the cause of the fire in the first place. But long story short, we worked with the insurance company. We pushed the insurance companies. We closed escrow in 1 week with the understanding that the buyer will buy the house as is with the roof, but the insurance had already given them a $16,000 check to renew the roof. So the buyer got $16,000 in escrow. I called the insurance companies. Back then, the insurance company talked to us, even though we're third party. I went to the buyer's, me and the buyer's agent went to the apartment manager, explained to them, got them a 30-day free extension. So we put it together. So, and I'm not saying that I did something good. If there was no agent, number one, they would not push to get the insurance done in 10 days. They would not gotten the extension for the buyer. We also talked to the moving company to delay 10 days and not charge them. And that's why you need a realtor, because there's so many moving parts to buying and selling. It's not just a house and a loan. There's appraisals, right, there's lending, there's inspection, there's moving, there's a notice given, and there's always some delay. So things like this happen, and you need an agent that's going to take care of it and jump in, because something happens, you don't know what's going on. The escrow I'm closing today was supposed to close next week, but they want to close a week early, and we're rushing to close today.
Yeah, I think it comes down to storytelling, right? I think there's a common misconception that most realtors are glorified door openers, and some are. There's no question. Some aren't worth what they're asking to be paid. But then a really good real estate agent and a really good realtor is going to have a problem-solving approach. They're going to take a look at what needs to get done. They're going to figure out where you are, and they're going to help you get to where you want to go with the least amount of steps and hassle, while maximizing your value along the way. And because there's no perfect real estate transaction, when something does happen, they're going to be able to help you solve those issues and work through them so that you can still continue with your life, because your life isn't about buying a house. Your life is about living your life. The house is a part of your journey, but you don't want it to become, the biggest stumbling block, and having a professional help you through that so that you can continue living your life is the best way to go about it.
Exactly. Right. And that those issues may be coming back, because the next point I want to talk about is, what's happening with the commission thing, right? When we got hit with the commission in March 2024, August when it took place, is I'm reading reports. They could be true or not, but I've heard several reports online. When I say heard, I didn't read them. I read them online. Is that there's a rise of the for sale by owners, what we call the for sale by owner 2.0. And the reason there might be a rise, we haven't seen stats yet, but they're saying that, because the buyers has to sign the buyer broker agreement and they have to pay the 3% commission, right, to the buyer's agent, for sale by owners are putting their home on the market. They don't have to pay the seller's agent. So instead of listing it, they're just saying, buy through me and bring a buyer's agent, and I'll pay the buyer 2% or 2.5%, 3%. So I don't know if you've seen that, but I've heard that, and I don't know how true that is. But if that is true and it picks up, that'll affect the number of transaction agents make. And that's why we're talking about it, the extinction of realtors. A lot of reasons could happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a small part of the market, because whenever it gets easy to sell a house, a lot of people try and sell it themselves. And so in our market in Atlanta, between 2020 and 2022, there was a rise in for sale by owners. I think it was like 1.7% of the market tried to sell it on their own, but they're also leaving an average of $17,000 on the table. Basically, they're not able to maximize that sales price. And even with commissions, I think every agent's different, but when I'm working with the seller, I'm averaging 4% more for my seller than what the market average is. When I'm working with the buyer, I'm negotiating 3.6% off of the sales price and getting an average of $7,800 in closing concessions over and above what the market is already doing. So, you can go for sale by owner, and you can try and find a buyer that either can't afford to pay their own agent and it's one party working directly with the other, but that doesn't solve all of the other challenges that those two parties have. You can hire an attorney to do contract work. You can even use ChatGPT potentially to write up a contract at this point. But understanding where the market is, what somebody's willing to pay, how to maximize that value, how to minimize as a seller repair items while you're under contract, how to line up the two transactions so you can sell yours and then buy the next one, or if you're moving cross country, whatever that might look like. It's dangerous. You're taking on a lot of risk when you're choosing to do that yourself. And if you're someone who has 10 transactions under your belt and you have a long history of being able to do this, then maybe you might be more successful if you tried the for sale by owner route. And certainly it works for some people. I
Right.
remember a couple of years ago, even the CEO of Zillow, of all places, tried to sell for sale by owner, failed, and then hired an agent, and then finally sold their property. So I think there's a time and place for it. And does it
Mhm.
make sense for some people? Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There was a stat out there. A lot of agents were using this on Instagram and TikTok, and I've seen it so many times. And the stat was, and this is a pathetic stat for realtors. So maybe if you're a realtor, close your ears. The stat said that last year in 2024, 70% of all the realtors out there did not sell one transaction, buyer or seller. Have you heard
Yeah,
that?
I heard that.
Right.
That's a lot of part-time agents
Right.
helping friends, family members, but even full-time agents. Like
Not
I
even one.
know
Yeah.
agents who haven't sold anything over the last year. Even this year they haven't. So
They haven't. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah.
that's the topic. And again, going back, our topic is not that they're going to go there, but the fear is that the end of real estate agents, if 70% did not sell one, and last year was a tough market, let's say they sell one, there's 1.5 million realtors right now. In 2020, 21, there were over 2 million, 2.2 million realtors. They've dropped significantly and they're stabilizing right now. And I just read a report just a few minutes ago before the show, is that we should see a little bit more uptick in realtors, but not as significant. So let's say it's stabilizing at 1.5. So now, and most realtors, the Pareto principle, 80-20, right? 20% of agents sell 80% of the property. But when it comes to real estate and stocks, 5% sell 95% of it. And that's
Yeah.
even getting more and more because there's a rise of teams right now. So where do you feel, talking to your network of realtors and your board and being active in the Association of Realtors, where do you find difficulty that the realtors are having? And how much more difficult is it going to be for the realtor who's a typical realtor, doesn't know what the heck is doing, is not skilled in the trends, not skilled on the market, not skilled in negotiating? Where do you see that going? So if I'm a seller or a buyer, I know how to talk to a realtor or pick a realtor when I want a buyer's agent or a seller's agent.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think it's going to be more important than ever to ask the right questions, because I think something like 86%, and don't quote me on that statistic, but it's a pretty high number of consumers only talk to one agent, and then that's who they choose to do business with. So I think it behooves a seller to interview multiple agents, because if you're talking to the one person and they're among the 70% who didn't sell a house last year, they're going to be hungry to get your listing. But if they're unable to get business, are they doing business? And I think it makes sense to work. You don't necessarily have to work with an agent that sells 1,000 houses a year. If you
Right.
want that personalized service, those teams, they sell a lot of houses, but you can find a regular individual agent that's still doing quite a bit of business where you get that one-on-one interaction as well. But it's going to be more important than ever to do a
Right.
proper interview process to make
Right.
sure that you're
Right.
working with someone who is doing business.
Exactly. So on that note, I just want to remind our viewers, and thanks for watching. Those of you who are watching us, I would really appreciate it. If you have any comments or let us know what's happening in your market. But while Terrence suggested that you talk to one realtor, a lot of the sellers, you know, if I sold a home and if I tell my aunt or somebody, hey, talk to somebody, they may be their cousin, but they may be an hour away. So don't list with them or sell with them. Find somebody in your local neighborhood, find somebody who's experienced, knows what's going on. And on that note, if you're looking for a realtor, if you're in Atlanta area, hit up Terrence. I'll have his description or information in my description. And at the same time, if you're in Texas or Florida, or anywhere else in the country, I belong to the top 5%, 3 to 5% of all the realtors nationwide. And I have that database because we network with them all the time. So if you need a realtor to talk to, I know you have your one. If you want to compare, make a comment and I'll refer you to an agent so you make the right decision when you are ready to buy or sell, and then see who you want to pick. So keep that in mind. So let's move on, Terrence. Furthermore, two things. One, let's talk about the seller because we're focusing on sellers right now. If you're selling a home, what should they be looking for in a realtor that provides value? Yes, they're going to
Sure.
put in the MLS and they're going to take pictures. What am I looking for when I want to sell my house and sell it fast and get me the price I want? And the price I want is the market value, not 300,000 over the market value.
Sure. Yeah, I think track record, recency and track record. So everyone's going, it's a game of poker. Everyone's going to tell you that they're going to do all of the nice things. And there are agents who do some phenomenal things when it comes to marketing. And that's important because in this day and age, it's not just a question of taking pictures, popping it in the MLS, crossing your fingers and hope
Yeah.
someone else sells your property. You've got to be as
Mhm.
proactive as possible. So sure, photography, videography, videos, all of the social stuff, more important than ever. You want to interview agents to see who's using all of that great
Mhm.
technology, who's using modern marketing strategies,
Right.
who's using the tried and tested traditional stuff and blending
Right.
it together to get actual results. And then of the results that they're getting, who's outperforming the market. So interview at least 3 different agents, and then don't just a lot of people like to tell you what they do. It's important to work with somebody who's going to show you what they actually do and can back up what they're saying. So
Right.
I think the nice thing is I think consumers are becoming more, they're more savvy about the home buying and selling process. It's important to work, and that's why they want to work with a professional. But
Right.
asking the right questions is where it all starts.
Right, right. So what happens if, let's say I listed a property because, my friend said, you know what, Mike, call Terrence. He's a great agent. And you guys are buddy. You play golf together. So you're a great guy. But you've sold 3 properties over the last year or so. And I list with you and it's not selling. Then how can I, as a seller, tell you? And I don't want to tell you something because you're a mutual friend. If you're not doing the right job or if you're not selling, my house is sitting on the market for 3 months and nothing's happening. How can a seller approach the agent and still keep the relationship and not get frustrated over the transaction?
I mean, that's a tough question because if you're blending business and friendship, sometimes that's tough to do. And I would never want to get in the way of, a relationship, a brokerage relationship that somebody has with their agent. But if they don't feel that their agent is meeting their expectations, it's okay to hold your agent accountable. And
Mhm.
from week to week to sit down and understand what's being done to actively market your property. And because it comes down to 3 things, it's price, condition, or marketing. So those are the 3 major factors that'll determine how quickly or how successfully your home sells for.
Mhm.
So maybe you've been at the price that you're at for a couple of weeks, but the marketing hasn't yet been fully rolled out and not enough marketing has been done to maximize exposure. So you always
Right.
start with maximizing exposure. You want as many eyes as possible on the property. And then at that point, what you have control over as a seller is condition. So you can sell any kind of house. I'm actually getting ready to list a property that's probably a tear down, and really the
Okay.
value is in the land. So it doesn't matter. I've sold houses that have been fire damaged, like whatever condition the property's in, you just have to make sure that price reflects what that condition is. So are you priced appropriately for the level of condition? So if a property is sitting there after a couple of weeks, your first 2 or 3 weeks, that initial pool of buyers in the market will have had time to come and see the property. If they have chosen not to, then the market is effectively rejecting the price. And if your agent is maximizing marketing, probably
Mhm.
time to have a conversation about price at that point.
Got it. Okay. So as we know, the market is changing. It's always changing, but it's changed a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. Um, my question was, for the seller, if I'm thinking about selling my home today in 2025 versus 23, 24, what is 1 or 2 things that's changing as far as marketing or pricing or whatever? And number 2, is it going to cost me more to sell a house today than it used to 2 years ago? Keeping in mind the tariff and the update cost and the labor cost and marketing cost and the commission cost. So let's talk about those 2.
I don't think costs have gone up tremendously. They peaked post pandemic, no question. Materials, all of that was way up, but like over the last year or so, it's negligible. I think what you're seeing is you're seeing less overall buyers in the marketplace. And I think when you look at, I saw a statistic that this past year, a third of all sales were cash transactions. And is that because there are suddenly more cash buyers in the market? Or is it the opposite? People who were waiting to get a loan waited and waited, and interest rates a year and a half ago shot up to 8%, and they've been between 6.5 and 7. And it's put home ownership out of reach for a lot of people. I'll give you a good
Right.
example. In my market, the median price house in Atlanta in 2020 was 300,000, right? Roughly a 1,500, 1,600 square foot, 4-bedroom house, $300,000, and interest rates were about 3%. And at that price, the median mortgage for the median house was about $1,500 a month. Fast forward to today, that same house at $300,000 is now $425,000.
Yeah.
Interest rates have gone from 3 all the way up to 7, and that payment went from $1,500 a month to $2,900 a month on the exact same house. They're not getting a house that's suddenly 3,000 or 3,200 square feet. That's double, yet their housing payment's doubled. So I think they're, for better or worse, it's certainly not better. There are less buyers who can do things, because if you were able to afford an $800,000 house in 2020, you're probably at $500,000 unless your income has gone up if things have stayed the same. So you can afford less house.
Right.
So there are a lot of buyers who are on the sidelines. So I think as a seller, you've got to be really aware of what's happening in your micro local market and understand what the trends are, because you might be in a part of the country that's moving very quickly. But if you're not, then overpricing a property, not having it in its peak condition, not taking an agent's advice on how to properly position it in the marketplace at the right price and so forth, will certainly make your life of selling a lot more difficult.
Right. Yeah. And here's another point to what you made. The interest rate went up, so your payment from $1,500 went up to $2,800. The house that cost $350 is now costing you $450. Gas price is more, food prices is more, your insurance is more, your property tax is more. So all that went up and up and up. Everything went up. Guess what has not gone up significantly? Your income. How much has the income gone up on average? Not that much. 3%, 5%, 4%, where home prices have gone up 20% in the last 3, 4, 5 years. Property taxes have skyrocketed depending on the states. California has not, but I know Florida has more than doubled or tripled. The insurance cost has gone up. If you look at Nebraska and Florida, they've doubled, tripled, quadrupled in certain areas.
They're up 40% in my market, and we're not a high risk market in Atlanta.
Exactly. Yeah. So what's happening is, and the reason we talk about is that if all the prices go up, if my salary stays the same, house prices go up, interest rates go up, everything else goes up, my gas, my utilities, my TV, my electricity, my water, everything goes up. I can't afford a home, so my affordability has gone down to 0, which means there are less buyers. If there's less buyers, there's less sales. If there's less sales, realtors make less money. And there's a lot of hungry agents out there. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of hungry agents, and there's a lot of 70% of those didn't sell a house. And maybe this year, 75% won't sell a house. They'll be out of business. And that's what we're talking about, that the market is changing, not just for buyers and sellers. And yes, they say that the 1.5 million number of realtors is going to stay stable, but they don't tell you how many are not selling. My prediction is that less agents are going to sell homes this year than last year, right? Because the rise of teams, number one, and the agents like you and me, we've been around for 20, 25 years. We've seen the recession. We've seen the ups and the downs. We're skilled. We work with buyers, sellers, investors. We did short sales, we did foreclosures, we did investments, we did income. So guys like us, most of my business at this point of my career is a lot of repeat and referrals. So I don't have to do a lot of going to Zillow ads and newspaper ads, or did I say newspaper ads? Well,
what's
white hair. Did I say that?
At least you have hair.
I meant digital newspaper ads, right? So okay. What I'm saying is, this is why we're talking about it. What do you think the sellers and buyers are thinking of realtors in the long term right now?
I think they're just wondering whether or not a realtor is necessary to sell a house with all the different messaging that you're getting. And you have, especially since the pandemic, there have been so many different technology platforms that have come out to try and let people know that, hey, maybe you don't need one. Open Door, Orchard, OfferPad, certainly that, which is interesting because a lot of those models, especially you look at Zillow offers, that failed famously back in 2021. But both Open Door, if you look at Open Door stock, their stock's down like 90% over the last year and a half. And it's like, why is that happening? Because there's a time and a place to sell your house directly to a fund, like a hedge fund that's going to buy that. In our market, hedge funds were buying up to a quarter. 1 out of 4 houses that were for sale in Atlanta were bought by a hedge fund out of Wall Street over the last 2 years. So But I think that there's a lot of mixed messaging in the marketplace about the value of a realtor, and it's done by design because you've got someone that's trying to sell you and make money off of a different thing.
Right.
It goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Zillow and Redfin with the clear cooperation policy. And if you're familiar with homes.com, who are part of the CoStar group, CoStar is in every aspect of real estate. They're in commercial real estate with LoopNet and CoStar. They own apartments.com. They own homes.com. They've put billions of dollars behind their platform to compete with Zillow. And they've taken the stance that Zillow is wrong on the clear cooperation policy and that people should report them to the Department of Justice. And I think as a consumer, you've got to see through that and understand that Zillow doesn't have your best interest. Homes.com doesn't have your best interest. These platforms are for profit. They're trying to make money off of selling whatever it is that they're selling. Zillow wants all of the listings, Redfin, etc., because if they have all of the listings on their platform, then they're going to continue to have the lion's share of the market with buyers who go on their platform to look for houses because they get all this great information.
Yeah.
Homes.com, their model's different. They get a fee for agents and say, it's your listing, it's your lead. But ultimately, I think with all this mixed messaging, to bring it back to your question, it's more important for the individual agent to be able to tell a compelling story about the value that they specifically bring into a transaction. And I think a lot of agents are going to have to do some soul searching because I don't think a lot of people understand what they actually bring to the table. But those who do are going to continue to differentiate themselves and to distance themselves from the pack. And those are the ones that the consumers are going to find and choose to work with.
Right. Yeah. As a realtor today, you have to be highly skilled, highly aware. And I think one thing that you have to really, really, really step it up is your customer service. Yes, there is customer service in real estate. Are you answering the phones? Are you calling them back? Are you getting the resources? I'm sure you do the same thing today. They want us to call insurance companies, and I've called 5 insurance companies to get quotes for them, because it used to be when I open up an escrow, at least in California, we have an issue with getting insurance, takes 2-3 weeks. So when I open escrow, the first thing I tell my buyers, don't call your lender first, right? Call your insurance, get me 5 quotes, because you're going to have a hard time getting quotes. Some of the insurance companies like State Farm, Allstate, some of those bigger ones are not giving any new policies. And that's more work. So what I do is I'm closing an escrow today, and I help him get that escrow company. I mean, the insurance. I did not call them, but I got him the number. And he called 3 different insurance companies. He called his company, but his was State Farm, and they said they're not insuring new policies. Allstate is doing that too. Farmers is doing that. At least they were doing it. I don't know if they've continued that or not. But our market is changing. Our service that we provide to the buyers and sellers is changing. It requires more hand-holding, more details. And like you said, if you don't provide all these services, the skills, the communication, I can see 90% of them not selling in 3 years, let alone 70% that did not sell one transaction. And the ones who are killing it are killing it. They'll sell, if they're selling 10 today, they'll sell 20. And the guy who's selling 1 will sell 0. And the guy who's selling just 3 will sell 1.
Yeah, I think you're spot on though, Mike, because when you look at all of the different things that you have to know about to complete a transaction, not just complete a transaction, but to come out ahead and to do it successfully, there's just so much to know about. I mean, you look at California with the insurance, I was doing a little bit of research into what's happening with insurance as a whole. Our market insurance prices are up big time, but it's not like California or Florida or parts of Louisiana or some of these other pockets where insurers have pulled out completely. Like that's so for you to understand all of the different moving parts to a transaction, and certainly that insurance perspective is more important than ever. I actually had a client buy a house a little bit earlier this year, and I helped them purchase the home back in 2021. They bought the house, great shape, but there was a tree that fell on the roof, and it caused obviously a lot of damage on the roof. And when the adjuster came out to the property, water was pouring into the attic. There was water everywhere. So the insurance company was Allstate. They did pay to put a brand new roof on that house, but that was less than 5 years ago. 4 years after they bought that house, they wanted to buy their next house. So we helped them purchase a house earlier this year. And they found out that they couldn't get insurance here in Georgia, of all places, because they had a roof replacement on their record.
Wow.
And so because we had built the contract in such a way that allowed for us to have different contingencies, we were also able to negotiate an extension on the contingency so that we could go out and look for secondary insurance providers.
Right.
And ultimately,
Right.
they found somebody. It's going to cost them a little bit more. And then we found out that it takes 5 years for a major issue, a major claim to fall off of your record. And after that, more insurance companies are open to insuring you. But this is Georgia. That's not California
Yeah.
with the fires and Louisiana with the floods and Florida with the hurricanes and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
it could happen anywhere,
Right.
So it's as agents, we have to know more than ever before. And there are more moving parts. I like to call it a puzzle. You put all the pieces on the table and you see how they all fit together.
Right.
Just today, there are more pieces on that table than at any other time in history.
Exactly. Right. By the way, whereabouts are you in Atlanta? Are you in proper Atlanta or where?
I'm right outside. I'm northwest Atlanta. So I'm in Marietta, and
Okay.
we're very close to where the Atlanta Braves play, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my brother is in Duluth. If you
Oh,
know
yeah.
what. Yeah. In fact, I was there
Absolutely.
last year. I came to a wedding day in Atlanta, near Duluth.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be in town the next time that you're in town. Let's catch up, I guess.
Okay.
That'd be
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we end, we'll end in a few minutes. I wanted to see, of course, you don't know and I don't know, and we're talking national trend. And of course, what we say is based on our conversation with our buyers and sellers and realtors and the experts and all the research that we do. Couple of questions, and of course, we're not expert, but what is your opinion, and big word opinion, on home prices nationwide? Not Atlanta, not Anaheim Hills, not Texas. Nationwide, is it going to go up or down? And what's going to happen with the interest rate? Just your opinion. Could be, we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would break it down by region. So
Okay.
without looking at city specific, I think from what I saw looking at the numbers, the Northeast right now is just so low on inventory that if you put anything on the market, it's selling within days. So if you're in that part of the US and that Northeast and you're putting something on the market, expect prices to go up. In the South, we're starting to contend with a lot of new construction. Developers built a lot of properties. There's still a lot more properties that would need to be built to meet demand. It's just you have an affordability problem right now. So I think in the South as a whole, you'll see probably prices maybe not go down a whole lot, but I think they might dip down just a little bit. Parts of Florida and Texas, which have been oversaturated with new construction, you're going to see prices go down. And then on the West Coast, it really depends. It's market specific. I think you might see prices go up in certain areas. Midwest maybe kind of stay equal. This over the next year or two. And I think interest rates, I think a lot of it, that's the biggest X factor, isn't it? Because it follows the 10-year treasury, and the 10-year treasury had dipped under 4% for the first time in years. And mortgage rates tend to lag a couple days after that happens, but they follow that very closely. The 30-year conventional does. And so when it dipped under 4 last week before, whenever that was, we're thinking, well, maybe rates will go down to 6.25. Maybe the Fed will announce another rate cut. And then it's like right now that it's just a big roller coaster. If you look at this time last year, rates went down from this time all the way down to the election. It went from 7% all the way down to 6.25. Then the election happened. They shot right back up. And from January to more recently, they started trending back downwards again. So every time that I think that we're going to get into the high fives, they reset back all the way up. And so it's anyone's best guess. I think we're seeing some things that are happening with geopolitical and economical factors that we've never seen. At least I haven't seen in my lifetime. I think the last time tariffs were used was before World War I. So I don't think anybody really truly knows what's going to happen, and they're just kind of waiting to see. But one thing's for sure, everyone's always going to need a roof over their head, and that's not going to change. So housing is here to stay. It's just how affordable is it going to be? What's going to happen with these external factors? What happens with consumer sentiment? And hopefully these rates come down, because if they come down, it's the easiest way to make housing a little bit more affordable for people would be to have rates come back down.
Yeah. Here's something I want to talk about, and we'll end with this. I don't know if you saw the news today, but I was looking at the new stock market today, and it's down. Right now, it's down 1,200 points after going 1,000 for the last 10 days. It's been down. Standard & Poor's is down 171. NASDAQ is down 593. Here's a headline today. with what our president said on Truth Social. And I cannot share with you, but it says stocks, dollar sink on threats to Fed independence, markets wrap. This is about, we all know that the Trump administration has been trying to force Jim Powell and the Feds to reduce the interest rate. And it took a big turn today. It crashed the stock market today. US stocks sell off deepened Monday after President Donald, and this is as of today, by the way, at 10:22 a.m. Eastern District Time, 10:22 a.m. California time or Eastern District Time. US stocks sell off deepened Monday after President Donald Trump stepped up his calls for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rate on social media. The president's threat to remove Fed Chair Jerome Powell have hit American assets broadly, weighing on longer dated treasuries and the dollar. The S&P sank 2.1%, blah, blah, blah. The US president took to Truth Social, escalating his attack on Feds, insisting there was virtually no inflation and it was time for preemptive cuts. I mean, I don't want to get into politics. This is not about politics when I read, but we don't know what the heck's going to happen with, one, we have all this stuff going on, inventory rising and falling, interest rate going up. But when you put something not out of the norm into a system, how is the system going to react? We don't know. What's your take on what's happening there? And of course, this is non-political, red or blue. This is strictly business. Yeah.
I think I had heard, and I don't have all the facts here, but I think that there's $9 to $13 trillion of US debt that's coming up in the next 5 months that has to be renegotiated. And they're trying to get the interest rates down to renegotiate that at a more favorable rate. When you look at the debt that the US carries, it seems like it goes up exponentially every single year. Mm-hmm. And it's like, honestly, I think most Americans are wondering what happens once you reach a level that's complete. I mean, I think it's unsustainable now, but who do you pay that debt to if you can't make those payments at some point? If those payments get to be higher than all of the revenue that's brought in, like what happens? Who does the US actually default to, So politics aside, they're trying to figure out how to get it all back under wraps. I think it's going to be a roller coaster over the next couple of years. And I think that doesn't help the housing industry. I think that it creates a lot of uncertainty in housing, and housing stocks have done well, but housing has been in a little bit of a slump over the last 2.5 years. So I think it's going to be a bumpy couple of years until we kind of figure out what's going to happen there. And I would expect the unexpected.
Yeah, because they've taken a big deep, and I work with a lot of investors. I do sell regular homes and buyers and sellers, but I also work with investors selling commercial property, land, or, units. And a lot of my investors who are my friends and past clients have a lot of stocks. And what has happened with these stocks, because I talk to them all the time, in the last 10 days, stocks, especially tech stocks, have gone down drastically. Look at today, 1,200. This is after it went down 3,000, 2,000, 1,500. Today, it's again 1,200 as of right now. I'm looking at it, and I'm assuming it's correct. It's 1,200 points down. What happens is, yes, I may not be buying stocks, but if I was an investor and I have two investors saying, let's wait, what this does, and I'm not just talking about investors, what it does to the sellers who are becoming buyers or buyers who want to buy, it affects what we call the consumer confidence. And right now, that's way low. Tariffs got their consumer confidence down. Now the stocks are plummeting. That brings their consumer confidence down. 401ks are now called 201ks. So there's a lot of negative chatter out there. So what happens is, NAR is predicting the number of homes will go up, but it may go down because of a consumer confidence. Everything's about consumer confidence. If I'm going on a vacation, I may think, oh, shoot, I don't want to go because blah, blah, blah. So I may lose and not go to New York or Bahamas or India and spend $5,000, which somebody else is not going to make. So all this has to do with consumer confidence. And I don't know, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I think there's a great buying opportunity, though. I think housing isn't quite there. There's deals everywhere. You're making money when you buy in real estate. I got to know where to look right now to find the really good deals. And they're not as plentiful, obviously, as they were previously. But if you look at just historically, are we going to see a big correction? If you were to put money, and this isn't financial advice in any way, shape, or form, but it's like, it's not about timing the market, but time in the market. And when you have pullbacks in the market, I think there are certain opportunities that present themselves to jump in at a better price. And then if you have a long time horizon, it's going to work itself out. If you're in the short term about to retire and you're worried about your 401k because that's your retirement, then obviously you're a little bit more on edge. If you're a millennial or Gen Z and you're just starting that process, I think you have such a long time horizon to build that up that might not be what you're overly concerned about. But certainly, I think it's age appropriate. Older generations are certainly looking at that a lot closer. And the older you get, you're supposed to diversify and get into safer assets as well. So hopefully you have a portfolio that's a little bit safer than being completely in the stock market as you get into those, older boomer, baby boomer years and so forth. So I think the generation's probably looking at this the closest is Gen X. I think they're looking at it going, oh my gosh, what's happening to everything that I just worked towards over the last 20 years.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's wait and see. It is a challenging market. It's becoming more challenging. And I think it's becoming more challenging because a lot of outside factors. We won't go there. We've talked about some. But let's wait and see. One thing is for sure, that if you're working with a realtor, make sure it's the right realtor, the right agent for you. Just because they're cousin doesn't mean they're the right agent for you. So check them out. Talk to, like Terrence said, interview more than one agent and pick the best one. If you tell us, if you interview me and say, no, I won't get disappointed, this is what we do. No is not a bad word for us, although we take it very seriously. So if you want a great agent, experienced agent, hit up Terrence in the Georgia area. Comment below anywhere in the States. I'll refer you to a great agent. But anytime you have any questions, feel free to put that in the comments or ask me, and I'll be glad to answer you. And if I cannot answer those questions, we'll get it for you. We'll get you resources. But hope this helped you a little bit. Let us know what you think, what concerns you. And Terrence, you were great on there. I hope if I call you again, you'll be willing to come back again.
Anytime, Mike. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks. I got to jump to another appointment. So talk to you later. Bye, everybody. Okay. See you next week at 5:30 California time, Home Savvy Central. Thanks.